No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. I just finished this book. I read it basically yesterday and today. It's called The Long Walk by Stephen King, but I've not really thought about it much at all, except to re-listen to the Just King Things episode about it, which, as with all Stephen King content on No Buzz, I'm going to say to turn this off. Just go listen to Just King Things. They're much smarter and have much more interesting things to say. And the whole project that I'm doing of reading Stephen King in publication order is literally just copying what they're doing, and sort of uh, just enjoying re-listening to what they have to say more than doing this necessarily. This isn't a bad one. This is the second Bachman book after Rage, that absolutely terrible thing. It's also the first thing I've read since reading The Stand, which you know I talked about that for like 45 minutes. So all predecessors are negative at this point. So here's, it's had a low bar to clear, both as a Bachman book and as a follow up to The Stand, as far as I'm concerned. And it cleared it, except for, you know, the weird amount of time that is spent on this 16-year-old character's dick. That's not my favorite thing in the world. But yeah, Long Walk. It's a dystopian US where 100 kids every year, by kids I mean people between 14 and 18, I'm pretty sure is the cutoff. As with most world building things in this book, it is extremely unclear. 100 kids get selected, sort of lottery style, to walk along the eastern seaboard, starting somewhere in Maine, and it seems like they change routes sometimes, but it seems like it's always in the same sort of area. Because there are references to previous walks and stuff like that. Of the 100, whoever is the last person walking, they have to walk for 4 miles an hour. Which I was thinking about it. That's like not slow. Like a 15-minute mile walking. It's not slow. And basically, yeah, they start off. They all start walking 4 miles an hour. The last one standing gets the prize, capital P, and that's whatever they want, allegedly. We follow in a close third. I think Ray Garrity is the character's name. The book is mostly just Garrity, alternatively, having conversations with the other walkers, sort of befriending them, be enemying them, that sort of thing, and then sort of reflecting bits on his own life, and then reflecting on the sort of extreme fatigue that he gets into as they go from, like, I think northern Maine all the way down to Massachusetts. They're like not quite at Boston. I think the book ends like 30 miles out of Boston or something like that. So if you know the Eastern Seaboard, then that means something to you that doesn't really mean to me, despite having family out there. Um, yeah, so we hear a lot about Garrity's how much his legs hurt and how tired he is, and he's a little weird, like dozing, walking dreams. I think the biggest genuine scare in this book is a Charlie horse that he gets. um, like it actually worked pretty well, which is kind of shocking because for the most part, I just found this book extremely readable. It was just a pleasant reading experience. I fucked up my lighting. Oh my god, that's like the one thing that I do. Um, anyway, yeah, it was very readable. You just kind of got through it. Things happened, people talked, and none of it was particularly egregious. There's like some fucked up shit in there, but that's a Stephen King book, especially a Bachman book, as I'm coming to understand. Um, the world building was like really honestly boring. Just like it's kind of like clearly a thing King didn't care about very much, which was interesting. Um, in that it allowed me not to care about it at all, and I didn't, and I still enjoyed the book because the man can write a sentence that follows another sentence that makes you want to read the next sentence after it. Um, and like frankly, that's there's I was like digging around a little bit because the end of this book is extremely ambiguous in a way that I feel like I'm not recalling other King. Like, what am I like? Carrie's ending didn't seem particularly ambiguous to me. The Shining's isn't very ambiguous at all. Um, Rage, who cares? um, and there's Night Shift. I'm missing something. Oh, Salem's Lot. It's just sad. Or, the fucking Father Callahan thing. I think is looming in my brain more than it even did at the end of that book. But that shit was sad, and that book was just very good. The Stand endings, fucking racist garbage. Uh, and then there's the Night Shift stuff that did have like ambiguous endings, but those are all short stories. Uh, for those who don't know, the end of the Long Walk ends with Garrity and Stebbins. Stebbins being the sort of like loner who's like we're always at the end of the pack, just like very put together. Like he's clearly in it to win it from the beginning, and he has nothing like befall him until the very end. He just he has been walking for 5 days and simply can't anymore, and he dies. And then Garrity wins, and then just walks past the Major, who is like the most cyberpunk mirror shades motherfucker, straight out of a Howard Hawks movie. That's probably actually where my brain went to, is like Howard Hawks, and then like Carpenter's sort of picking up on Howard Hawks, in that this is an extremely homosocial situation. I'm thinking Carpenter specifically of Assault on Precinct 13 and The Thing, where a bunch of men are stuck together in a small room, and they just talk to each other a bunch and have to navigate what it's like to be a man in a room with other men under stressful situations. And despite the fact that this is on a walk rather than a room, it is they're all extremely cordoned off. There's like crowds cheering them and shit like that, but like they basically get no interaction except for amongst each other, with the exception of which is the one I know. So there's a character named Olson who's like all ready to go. He's gung ho at the beginning, but he immediately like sort of like loses his will, or like he becomes bare life in a weird way. The Agamben thing, which I've never actually read that essay, so I might be using it wrong, but he ends up lasting over the first like 50 kids, or 60 maybe even. Like he's still in there, but he's just like this shambling presence. He's like he has no function other than to be like, this is what you can break down to. Um, Except for at the end when he just like turns and walks up to the half track, which is a thing. I was like, is that a thing Stephen King made up for this? Is that a real thing? And then I looked it up, and it's a real thing. It's like a car with like wheels in the front and then like treads in the back, basically to be like, it's like a you know back wheel powered drive. So it's for like military off roading shit. So that's like going along. Those are like going along the sides, and that's where the soldiers who shoot you if you fail to walk for 4 miles an hour for 2 minutes are. Olson is one of the ones who just like turns, walks straight to the half track, and like starts clambering up it, and gets like shot, but then like tries to like uh, like turn the gun on the troops, and I was like, hell yeah, Olson, and then he gets killed. And there's another character whose name I'm forgetting who does successfully kill one of the soldiers, and I was like, hell yeah, that dude. Those are fun moments. Um, but Stebbins is kind of the like the final boss. It ends up being revealed that he's the son of the Major. He's a bastard son of the Major. Um, Also, when I say that the world building is really uninteresting, it's like very clearly just doing a like the way that King signals that this is a dystopia is that Garrity's father got uh, got disappeared like 11 years ago when Garrity was like 7, or no, sorry, he's 16 in the book, so 5 or whatever. And it's clear that his father was made to disappear because his father was like a jovial dude who was like really nice, but like couldn't keep his politics to himself, so he'd get drunk and talk too much about how the long walk was bullshit and like a bad thing. So he got squatted is the term they use for disappeared. And then I think the only other person who ever talks about a squattable offense is somebody who mentions that he at like 12 years old got into the KKK and got out of it 3 years later because he burned a cross in a black family's yard, and then he was like, this seems silly, isn't that part of the past? And then he stopped being in the KKK. But he mentioned specifically that you know, being a night rider is also a squattable offense, which to me just screams um, your authoritarian liberalism, I guess. Just like, can't be too far. You can't criticize the government from the left or the right, or else we're gonna disappear you. Which is like just wildly uninteresting to me. Um, but yeah, uh, Stebbin is the final boss, and he's like, alone or whatever, whatever, whatever. And so at the end, he finally dies. Garrity walks, and the major shows up and like to congratulate him. And Garrity's like so in his own head, he's seeing this image of a dark person in front of him who he can't quite figure out who it is. He's like delusioned himself into being like, is it Stebbin? Is it Bla- Bla- Barkovich? I think was the name of the like annoying one, the evil one in some ways. Is it McBride? Is it whatever? And like the book ends with like somebody touching his shoulder, presumably the major being like, "Hey, you won" or whatever, and he just brushes it off and finds the strength to run or whatever, and so he's like, sprinting toward this figure that he's presumably hallucinating. Which the reason I got here is because I listened to the Just King Things thing where they had sort of a back and forth on whether that was sort of like Garrity dying or whether it was sort of a figuration of they didn't say the words PTSD, but in some way that's how I would sort of think about it. Of like, yeah, you never leave the walk. Basically, you can win, but you're gonna be walking and for the rest of your life because of the extremely traumatic shit that you've done both to body and brain, and that has been done to other people. So I was looking that up, and this is all wrapping around to my original point, I promise. I was like, just kind of like, I wonder what people have to say about that ending. So I just kind of like Googled around and read like a little Goodreads thread, and saw people talking about, and this is related to the point in Just King Things again. A better listen than this. Just King Things. Cameron Kunzelman talks pretty extensively about how he was reading it sort of as a Vietnam War sort of story, in the vein of the things they carried. And Michael was sort of mentions that Michael Lutz mentions that he was sort of reading it as like sort of just an allegory of death. I think a lot of what I saw, just sort of like glancing around the internet, like comment section sort of posts, is people talking about, the long walk is life, right? It's all an allegory. Like you just have to keep trudging on. There's a minimum you have to do to get by, and the penalty is death if you don't. And you can like move up, you can try to break out of it, but like, it's simply an allegory for life, that sort of thing. And I don't mean to minimize that in any way, which I feel like I may be sort of unintentionally doing. I think you could read this book at a period of your life that it would be useful to sort of think through it, or to sort of like have it unlock a sense of the world. That is not me. That was not my read of this book. I don't think, and further, I don't care what, like, if King had anything in mind, which isn't to say like, I don't care what he was thinking or whatever. That could be interesting theoretically, but like, for me, reading The Long Walk Stephen King writing as Richard Bachman. The point was to have a fairly enjoyable read and not worry too much about it. It was to see King doing this thing that he's quite good at doing, right? Like um, King doing the Howard Hawks, doing the John Carpenter. There's other like very good examples of that. I mean, like Cormac McCarthy even is like can operate in this register, although it's much more isolated most of the time. Can I pull anything else off the top of my head? Not really. Yeah, it's it's an interesting experiment in sort of like storytelling as a way to engage with sort of forced homosocial activity, which is like a thing I'm always really interested in and like fascinated by the person who, um, like really didn't know how to do that when that was the assumption of gender that I was operating under. Um, and so seeing it fictionalized is always interesting. I don't know. Maybe that's enough on that. And maybe that's enough on the long walk, honestly. Because yeah, I think the whole long point I was getting back to was just the allegory thing and how I think it was not useful to me to read it as an allegory, but I do think there might be, and have seen comments and listened to a podcast that take take the allegorical energy in here and make it into something useful in terms of analyzing the book or thinking through the ways in which the book can be impactful. Um, for me, though, it was like, yeah, it's I'm probably gonna forget about this book in a month. Is I think like the long and short of it, and that's fine. Like that's cool. I'm glad that I read this and that I had a perfectly fine time over the course of like I don't know, like 4 hours over a couple days, and maybe five, and now I can keep reading other shit. I don't know. I got one of these that I still gotta do, and it's on the first volume of Proust. Okay, we'll get there when we get there, won't we? Just me and the bees, because it's just a no bees book club. Anyway, thanks for not watching.